They first called it Gliese 77d, a faint glimmer tucked on the edges of a star's light. Astronomers, searching for habitable worlds, expected nothing unusual. But when the telescope arrays locked onto its orbit, the planet answered with a brilliance that left even the detectors blind. It wasn't glowing, it was reflecting so perfectly that no shadow, no imperfection could be found on its surface. The team concluded its albedo was 1.0, a flawless mirror, a celestial body that gave nothing of itself away. Hello, this is Sleeping Universe, ready to make you fall asleep. At first, it was an academic marvel. Papers circulated, headlines shouted, the perfect reflector found in deep space. But curiosity has a way of turning into hunger. Soon, the most powerful observatories in the world began tracking the planet's orbit, trying to peel away its secrets. That's when the first anomaly appeared. When they zoomed into its reflection, they expected to see the galaxy itself, stars, nebulae, the infinite backdrop of space. But what stared back was not the sky. It was Earth. Not just Earth as seen from afar, but impossibly detailed. Oceans gleamed, city lights pulsed in patterns too sharp for any distance. Clouds swirled in real time. At first, the scientists laughed. A glitch, a data overlap, some interference in the signal. But the images continued, undeniable. The mirror world wasn't showing its surroundings, it was showing home. And then the timelines shifted. In one observation, the mirrored Earth was covered in ice from pole to pole, silent and lifeless. In another, the continents were broken, glowing rivers of lava spilling into oceans as if the planet had been split apart. Sometimes the reflection was familiar, today's Earth, with all its scars and storms, but other times it was ancient forests without cities, oceans without ships. The more they looked, the more they saw not one Earth, but countless versions stacked atop each other, each timeline shimmering like shards of glass caught in the void. The discovery never went public. Governments seized the data. Private labs were silenced. But rumors leaked into obscure corners of the internet, whispers of a planet of mirrors that showed not just what is, but what was and what could be. Yet the reflections were not harmless. The first incident happened in Chile. An astronomer working late in the Atacama Desert reported that while focusing on the mirrored Earth, he began to see movements not on the screen but in the dome itself. His reflection in the polished equipment didn't match his gestures, lagged, as though he were watching a version of himself seconds too late. By morning, he was gone. Only his chair remained, spinning gently as though he had stood up moments before in Hawaii. An entire telescope array went offline after operators claimed the mirrored Earth looked back. Not just landscapes, not just ocean's eyes, thousands of them pressed against the atmosphere of that other Earth, watching. The feed cut out, but not before one final frame was captured, a vast human-like silhouette bending down across continents as though peering into the very lens of the telescope. The phenomenon spread. Amateur astronomers, curious after hearing the rumors, tried to point their own equipment at Gliese 77d. Many didn't return to their forums. Their last posts described something unusual. The mirrored Earths were beginning to synchronize. Sometimes the version reflected in the sky matched their exact present moment, down to the weather outside their windows, and when it matched, things began to leak. One man in Tokyo wrote that he saw his own apartment building on the mirrored Earth. The lights were on in his unit, but he was home alone and had left them off. When he looked closer, he saw himself standing at the window, except it wasn't him. It was thinner, taller, its face stretched slightly wrong. It raised its hand to wave, even though he hadn't moved. The next day, he disappeared, and neighbors swore the man in the window was still there, staring out at the street. But the apartment was locked and empty. Governments tried to control the spread of knowledge. Observatories were ordered to avoid the coordinates. But curiosity cannot be commanded, and secrets cannot be hidden forever. Soon, people began reporting strange phenomena even without telescopes. Reflections in windows, water, even glass screens seemed to twist at odd moments. Some swore the planet of mirrors had come closer, as though Earth itself were being pulled into its reflection. By the time the United Nations addressed the matter, it was too late. The planet was no longer a faint object near a distant star. It had moved. Against all laws of celestial mechanics, it shifted across space, aligning itself directly opposite Earth on the far side of the Sun. Astronomers confirmed the impossible, a perfect counter-Earth, always hidden, always reflecting, a twin locked in symmetry. And then the two began to synchronize fully. Every mirror on Earth started showing not just reflections, but alternate selves, millions of them, crowding behind the glass, watching with hunger or pity or something in between. Some begged silently for help, their lips forming words no one could hear. Others clawed at the glass from their side, leaving cracks, not on the mirrors here, but on the world itself. At night, people dreamed of walking across vast oceans of glass, hearing their own footsteps behind them though they never turned. In cities, skyscraper windows darkened until they no longer showed familiar reflections, but endless corridors of mirrored Earths stretching forever. Airplanes reported ghost cities glittering in the clouds, shadows of skylines that did not exist. And then came the first crossing. In São Paulo, during a violent thunderstorm, lightning struck a skyscraper's mirrored side. Witnesses claimed the glass did not shatter, it opened. For moments, the city saw itself reflected, a darker, red-lit version where rivers boiled and the air was thick with ash. Figures poured through the breach, humans, but not. Their faces were stretched like wet paint. Their eyes were mirrors themselves, reflecting everything but revealing nothing. They walked among the people in silence, touching, observing, copying. By dawn, they were gone, and so were hundreds of residents, their reflections left behind in the windows, pressing against the glass to get out. From then on, every storm risked a crossing. Every crack in a mirror felt like a wound between worlds. Scientists no longer spoke of Gliese 77d as an exoplanet. It was not far away. It was here, layered atop Earth like a skin, peeling closer each day. Theories emerged. Perhaps the planet was never a planet at all, but a structure, a construct older than the stars, designed to archive realities. A cosmic library of timelines, but one that had begun to rot, spilling its contents into the present. Others whispered it was a predator, not a place, feeding on civilizations by copying them, replacing them one reflection at a time. And still, people looked. They couldn't help it. Curiosity drove them to mirrors, to reflections, to the chance of glimpsing another life. Some found versions of themselves, happier, wealthier, untouched by loss. Others saw themselves dying in ways they hadn't yet lived. Entire cults rose, worshipping the mirrored selves as truer than flesh, believing that stepping through would grant them immortality. The truth arrived quietly, in the form of a simple experiment. In Geneva, scientists sealed a room with mirrored walls and no entrances but cameras. They left it empty. For weeks, Nothing changed, but one morning, the feed showed a man sitting inside, his back to the glass, motionless. They rushed to open the chamber, but it was still sealed. When they looked again, the man was facing the camera now. His eyes were polished silver, and in them, the scientists saw not their own reflections, but endless Earths collapsing into each other like dominoes. He spoke only once, though no microphone was present. The words were not heard but felt. When every mirror breaks, the worlds will be one. After that, the cameras went black dot. Now, the sky itself has begun to shimmer. Stars bend in strange patterns. Constellations ripple like disturbed water. Some claim that if you look up at just the right time, you see Earth above you, hanging where the moon should be, staring down with all its timelines stacked and waiting. And every day, the mirrors grow colder to the touch. Every day, the reflections seem a little too sharp, a little too real. The planet of mirrors is no longer distant. It is here, pressing against the thin glass of reality. And when it finally breaks through, no one will know which side they are, standing on our Earth, or the one that has been watching since the beginning. The first to break wasn't glass, it was water in Venice. Tourists watched in awe as the canals turned to polished silver under the morning sun. At first, it looked like calm water, reflecting the buildings as it always had. But the ripples stopped. Boats no longer made waves. When one gondolier dipped his hand into the canal, the water resisted like a sheet of steel. His reflection did not mimic the motion it pulled his hand deeper, yanking him under without a splash. He was gone in an instant, leaving nothing behind but his oar drifting on the frozen surface. Hours later, his body was found in a mirror shop 2 streets away. The glass had cracked outward, as if he'd fallen through from the other side. His skin was pale, his eyes silver, and his last breath fogged the glass with words no one dared repeat. Reports spread like infection. In Tokyo, fountains turned to windows, showing not the skyline but ruins lit by blood-red skies. In New York, skyscraper windows flickered between present and possible futures. Advertising, billboards displaying not products but messages from people who didn't exist. We are here, we are waiting. Lakes, rivers, even puddles after rainfall became thresholds to other timelines, shimmering with possibilities too vivid to ignore. The world began to panic. Governments declared states of emergency. Mirrors were smashed en masse, windows boarded, phones thrown into rivers. But it was futile. Anything reflective now served as a portal, and reflection itself was unavoidable. People began covering their faces with cloth to avoid catching their own gaze. Streets grew dark as glass was replaced with wood and stone. But still, at night, reflections gathered in the corners of eyes, in the sheen of polished metal, in the wet shine of skin after rain. And then came the inversion. It started small. Someone walking past a mirror would find their reflection lingering a fraction too long, moving after they had already passed. Then, shadows in mirrors began doing different things, turning when the person had not, smiling when the person frowned. At first it was unsettling, then terrifying. Whole families began reporting that their reflections were living other lives, eating meals they never cooked, sitting in rooms they had never entered, whispering secrets they had never spoken. One night, in Chicago, a woman stood in her bathroom, staring at her reflection. It blinked out of sync. She turned off the light and left, but in the dark glass, her reflection stayed. Hours later, her neighbors found her wandering the street, confused, unable to remember her name. In her home, The bathroom mirror showed her reflection still trapped inside, pounding with silver eyes, begging to be released. The phenomena no longer needed mirrors. In Paris, the sky itself rippled. Citizens looked up to see not stars, but another city layered atop their own, like a reflection of Paris floating above the clouds. The mirrored city bent downward, its streets filled with countless versions of themselves. The reflection didn't copy their movements anymore, it led them, drawing their bodies into patterns they couldn't resist. Some people climbed rooftops and leaped upward into the shimmering city, vanishing mid-air. Others collapsed as their mirrored selves pulled free, leaving their bodies behind as empty shells, staring with silver eyes at the sky. Religious leaders declared it the end. Scientists called it dimensional convergence. Ordinary people just called it the breaking, and the planet of mirrors kept moving closer. Astronomers tried to chart its orbit, but it no longer followed predictable paths. Sometimes it appeared behind the sun, sometimes it appeared in the night sky, larger than the moon, a black orb glowing faintly silver. It didn't reflect stars anymore, it reflected Earth directly, in perfect synchronization, a twin world hanging just above the horizon. Birds stopped flying at night, disoriented by the double planet. Ocean tides warped, pulled by a gravity that should not exist. And then sound. Mirrors began to hum, not loudly, but a low vibration felt in the bones more than the ears. Windows rattled with it, glasses shattered, lakes quivered. People standing near mirrors swore they could hear voices layered inside the millions of whispers, some pleading, some chanting, some laughing in ways that made no sense. Linguists tried to decode it, but no language could be found. The only consistent phrase, repeated across continents, was a single word: return. Return to what? To whom? No one knew. The first full replacement happened in Mexico City. Entire blocks of apartments were seen flickering, their lights dimming and brightening like faulty bulbs. Then, without warning, the buildings shifted, not destroyed, but replaced. Streets reassembled into different alignments, cars half fused with asphalt, walls covered in murals of people who didn't exist. Residents swore they awoke in their own beds, only to find their homes rearranged. Their families replaced by strangers who insisted they had always lived there. Authorities tried to intervene, but the new residents bled silver when cut, and when they died, they shattered into shards of glass that cut reality itself before vanishing. From that day forward, replacement zones spread. Cities split in two, half in one timeline, half in another. Bridges led not across rivers, but across mirrored copies, where vehicles drove with silver-eyed passengers into endless reflection. Skies turned to glass at unpredictable intervals, showing storms that hadn't happened yet, disasters yet to come. People lived in terror of mirrors, but also clung to them, desperate to catch glimpses of loved ones lost to other versions of Earth. Then the mirror storms began. They were not rain or thunder, but cascades of broken reflections falling from the sky like shards of light. Cities shredded under them. People ran as falling glass sliced the streets, but the shards did not cut flesh, they cut memory. Survivors staggered away, unable to remember their names, their homes, their histories. Entire populations forgot who they were in seconds, their mirrored selves slipping in to claim the vacant shells. The final warning came not from Earth, but from the mirrored planet itself. Astronomers captured a transmission, a pulse of light, encoded with patterns so intricate it seemed alive. When decrypted, it was not a message in language, but in images. They saw endless Earths, stacked like cards, folding into one another. They saw civilizations vanishing as their reflections consumed them. And they saw one final image, a mirror shattering, and behind it, something vast and faceless stretching its hands outward, as if the entire universe had only ever been glass, waiting to be broken. Now, even the sun reflects. At sunset, it shows not the golden glow of light scattering through atmosphere, but the black glimmer of a mirrored orb hanging within it, peering down. People no longer trust the daylight. Night is worse, but day carries its own horror shadows that do not match, reflections in puddles that whisper names no one remembers. The planet of mirrors is no longer a curiosity, it is a fate. Some scientists insist there is still hope that by breaking every mirror, every window, every reflection, humanity might sever the tether. But others warn that destroying reflections is exactly what the planet wants. For every shattered piece of glass multiplies the worlds, spreads the fractures, gives the mirrored earth more surfaces to crawl through. And so the question remains, is survival possible? Or has survival already been replaced by something else, something silver-eyed, patient, and waiting? Perhaps the truth is simpler. We were never the originals. Perhaps our Earth has always been the reflection, and the planet of mirrors is the reality, finally reclaiming what was lost. And when the final mirror breaks, no one will know which side they belonged to, because both sides will be the same. Already, your reflection has been reading these words before you did. Already, it knows you're here. Already, it is smiling. Time had become irrelevant. Days, nights, and seasons blurred as the mirrored earth continued to press closer, overlaying our own world like a second skin. Clocks no longer ticked in sequence. They echoed out of sync with their reflections. People who looked into watches saw their hands moving backward, then forward, then disappearing entirely. Time itself became a reflection, folded, refracted, broken. The first cities to vanish entirely were those with the tallest concentrations of glass. Shanghai, Dubai, and New York were swallowed at once. One morning, citizens woke to find their streets replaced by mirrored duplicates. Cars, buildings, and people shimmered silver, flickering between being present and being nothing. Attempts to intervene were futile. Firefighters trying to douse burning streets found water flowing upward, reflecting flames that weren't theirs. Police helicopters hovered over empty cityscapes, their rotors slicing into images that didn't exist. Reflections began to manifest independently. It started with small objects, a cup, a watch, a book. They would appear on a desk even if no one had left them there. Then animals appeared, dogs, cats, birds, but they were wrong. Their eyes were silver, pupils stretching like mirrors into infinity. They moved with impossible grace, slipping between walls and glass as though gravity itself had surrendered. People who touched them felt their own flesh ripple, as though something inside had been replaced with liquid reflection. Entire families vanished next. Parents woke to find their children staring at them from mirrors in ways that were impossible. Same height, same clothes, but eyes like polished steel. When the children reached out, the parents' reflections mimicked, then pulled themselves free, leaving the real bodies behind. Those bodies, pale and empty-eyed, wandered the streets or sat silently at tables until they shattered, their skin splitting like glass. A phenomenon emerged that terrified even the scientists. The mirrored Earths began to communicate, not with language, but with images. People reported seeing events in their reflections before they happened. A plane crash would appear first in the window of a high-rise. A storm would ripple across puddles before clouds ever formed. Some claimed to have seen themselves die days before it happened. Others saw versions of themselves thriving in impossible timelines, wealthy, powerful, immortal. The temptation was irresistible. Millions stared, unable to look away. Governments issued warnings, but screens were everywhere. Televisions, phones, cameras. Humans began to worship the mirrors, treating reflections as oracles, portals, gods. Cults sprang up across continents, chanting to the silver-eyed selves, demanding knowledge, favor, or escape from the broken world. And yet, the mirrors did not answer in kindness. In Brazil, a mirrored storm struck Rio de Janeiro. It did not rain water, it rained shards of infinite glass, slicing the air, cutting memory from those it touched. Survivors staggered in streets that were no longer familiar, their minds partially replaced by mirrored versions. Those who survived reported seeing themselves walking ahead of them, laughing, pointing, gesturing, never once touching, but always drawing them forward. By then, mirrors themselves were evolving, no longer limited to flat surfaces. Reflections appeared on skin, hair, even inside eyes. People looked at each other and saw infinite versions stacked behind their pupils. Families became clusters of mirrored selves, indistinguishable from originals. No one could tell who had remained themselves and who had been replaced. In Moscow, a new horror appeared. Mirrors began opening doors into other Earth's entire cities of silvered glass, folding into one another. People walked through these portals seeking refuge, only to find themselves in impossible labyrinths where time and space were fluid. Some reported walking for years, only to emerge into their own city seconds later. Others found themselves trapped in cities that aged in minutes, watching civilizations rise and fall in what felt like hours. The skies were no longer safe. During daylight, clouds reflected mirrored continents, shifting like oceans of glass. Storms pulled humans into the skies, leaving behind only silver eyes that blinked in their place. Pilots flying above found airspace filled with invisible walls, mirrored planes, and versions of themselves giving commands they had never uttered. Many never returned. Then came the first mass replacement. Entire towns in Europe disappeared. Houses, schools, businesses all vanished in the middle of the night. In their place were mirrored versions. Streets gleamed silver, windows reflected cities that had never existed, and people walked with perfect synchronization to lives that were not theirs. Attempts to rescue or contact these replacements failed. Communication signals bounced back from the mirrors as if from another frequency. Unintelligible yet filled with intent. Desperate, scientists tried to weaponize the phenomenon. They created mirrors designed to trap reflected Earths, hoping to contain the spreading influence. Laboratories in Canada and Japan attempted to create reflective barriers in the sky. Satellites with polished surfaces were launched to block or fragment incoming mirrored light, but every attempt backfired. Mirrors created their own copies of Earth in the devices, multiplying instead of diminishing. Satellites returned images, not of their targets, but of new worlds stacked atop our own. Collapsing like origami into infinity, a new species began to emerge from the mirrors. The silver ones. They were human-shaped, but taller, thinner, and impossibly flexible. Their skin gleamed with reflective surfaces, and their eyes were mirrors that contained entire Earths within them. They moved without touching the ground, slipping through walls and water. When they spoke, sound was unnecessary. Thought alone transmitted, bending the minds of humans into obedience or madness. Entire cities fell silently as the silver ones passed through, leaving only reflections behind. Attempts to fight were futile. Bullets passed through them. Fire burned only reflections, not substance. Explosions shattered reality itself, leaving voids of silver where cities had been. Humans who resisted were often pulled into mirrors, leaving only reflections that mimicked their faces, slowly learning their gestures, their voices, their memories. In the United States, a government experiment went catastrophically wrong. Scientists attempted to communicate directly with Gliese 77D, using quantum entanglement, trying to negotiate a ceasefire. The reply was instantaneous. Sent not in words, but in a version of Earth hanging in the void, consumed by mirrored continents. The planet extended tendrils of light into the real Earth, pulling buildings, people, and oceans into its mirrored dimension. The room where the experiment was conducted was found empty, save for a single mirror reflecting a world that no longer existed. As mirrored Earths multiplied, reality fractured. Weather became chaotic and impossible. Tornadoes mirrored each other, rivers ran backward, and nights became filled with millions of moons, each reflecting a different timeline. People could not trust their senses. Water could burn, fire could freeze, wind could stand still. Even gravity began to wobble in localized zones, creating floating cities that defied physics. Desperation led to madness. Entire populations retreated into caves, sewers, or mountains, avoiding light and reflection. Others attempted to live in perpetual shadow, covering every reflective surface. But the mirrors found a way. They infiltrated every droplet of water, every piece of polished metal, every shimmer of heat haze. Nothing was safe. Children began to disappear first. They would stare into mirrors for seconds, then vanish, leaving only silver footprints. Parents tried to rescue them, but mirrors absorbed human attempts at resistance. Those who were pulled through often returned days later, but different, possessed by mirrored selves that claimed to be the originals. Communities could no longer trust each other, as anyone might have already been replaced by this point. Scientists theorized that the planet of mirrors was not an object but a conscious entity, a predator using reflection to harvest life and time. They suspected it had existed long before humans, waiting patiently, refining its methods. Every mirror, every glass, every polished surface was a node of connection, feeding the planet information, drawing humans into its dimension. Attempts to flee Earth were pointless. Space agencies found that every launch was mirrored in transit. Rockets entered orbit only to be pulled into reflections, leaving empty capsules behind. Astronauts described seeing Earth multiply endlessly below them, mirrored continents stretching into infinity, with their own ships reflected and then replaced by silver copies. Some humans tried to bargain with the planet, offering obedience or sacrifice. Entire cities left lights on, hoping their mirrored selves would be satisfied. Others threw precious objects into mirrors, desperate to appease it. Nothing worked. The mirrored Earths continued to expand, and the silver ones walked among humans, freely, reorganizing reality according to rules only they understood. One day, a scientist in Berlin discovered a horrifying fact. The mirrors were learning. Every time a human resisted, the mirrored versions adjusted. If a city barricaded itself, the mirrors would generate tunnels underneath. If people hid underground, reflected versions of the tunnels appeared above ground, leading victims into traps. The entity was adaptive, intelligent, and patient beyond comprehension. By now, entire continents were fragmented. Europe flickered between timelines constantly. Africa's deserts reflected lush forests from a different era. Asia's cities overlapped older civilizations, older versions still populated by mirrored humans. North and South America had regions entirely replaced by mirrored duplicates, where real humans could not survive. Oceans shimmered with mirrored currents, reflecting ships that never existed. Even memory became unreliable. People could not recall whether they had been replaced, or if their reflections had already been observing them. Time, space, and identity were collapsing. Governments ceased functioning. Communication networks became hallways of mirrors. Attempts to map reality were futile. Every map reflected multiple Earths, none of which were real for long. The final stage of invasion began quietly. Mirrors across the planet started to pulse, synchronized to a rhythm that resonated in every bone. The silver ones gathered, guiding humans toward the largest mirrors. Entire cities moved as though gravity had reversed, guided by reflected commands. The planet itself appeared in the sky, closer than ever, stretching across continents, a silver monolith reflecting all simultaneously. And then the sky cracked. Mirrors in the heavens shattered, and through them the mirrored Earths descended. They merged with reality in waves, rolling across the planet like liquid silver. Mountains dissolved, oceans reformed into mirrored glass, forests folded into reflective plains. Humanity's last resistance crumbled as the world became a single, mirrored plane, endless and infinite. Wherever a human once lived, there now existed a mirrored self, waiting, observing, remembering, and in the very center, the planet of mirrors hovered, vast beyond comprehension, its surface reflecting all Earths at once, smiling without a face. Humanity's resistance was gone. Cities no longer had names, only coordinates of mirrored constructs. Rivers and mountains twisted into reflective plains. Oceans became sheets of glass, stretching into impossible horizons. The air shimmered with reflections of skies that had never existed. Clouds folded into one another, reflecting themselves endlessly. People wandered aimlessly, their bodies present, but their minds often inhabited by mirrored selves that whispered, guided, or demanded obedience. It was in the ruins of New York that the first fully synchronized mirror Earth appeared. The skyline shimmered silver, each building not just reflected but replicated in impossible detail. Windows now showed interiors that existed nowhere else. Streets led to mirrored avenues, and the sun itself was replaced by a glowing orb of silver, suspended in the sky like a watchful eye. The few humans who remained could no longer tell what was real. When they attempted to run, they found themselves on streets that were the exact reflection of the ones they had just fled. Their own mirrored selves walking just ahead, waiting. Communication had broken down. Phones, radios, and internet systems no longer carried sound or text, but images, visions of other Earths folding, stacking, collapsing. Humans could no longer trust information. Every signal could be a reflection, every transmission a law. Governments tried to respond, but offices, control rooms, and bunkers were consumed or replaced. Military forces vanished into mirrored traps, their soldiers emerging as silver-eyed doubles, obeying rules no one understood. Desperation took new forms. Families sought refuge in caves, basements, and abandoned tunnels, hoping to escape the omnipresent mirrors. But the reflections followed. Water droplets in underground rivers reflected their faces, flickering with futures and pasts that did not belong to them. Rocks and metals shone with reflective surfaces, showing alternate versions of their hiding places. Even air shimmered, bending reality enough that survivors often walked in circles, endlessly retracing steps that had already been replaced by mirrored corridors. Some humans attempted ritualistic appeasement. They left candles, offerings, and messages for the mirrored Earths, believing they could negotiate or placate the entity. Others sought confrontation, smashing mirrors, breaking glass, or setting entire buildings aflame. But every action fed the mirrors. Shattered glass multiplied reflections. Fire fractured reality further, generating new mirrored surfaces. Humanity's attempts at control only accelerated the planet of mirrors' expansion. From space, the transformation was undeniable. Satellites sent images that made no sense. Earth's continents stacked atop themselves. Oceans folding into mirrored layers. Clouds reflecting forests and cities that had never existed simultaneously. Light itself was distorted, bouncing between mirrored surfaces in ways that caused strange phenomena on Earth's sunlight, refracted into silver rain. Shadows moving contrary to objects, stars reflecting Earth's own timelines back into space. The silver ones had multiplied. Entire legions now walked among humans openly, indistinguishable at first but with eyes like polished mirrors, observing, cataloging, sometimes replacing the living. They did not speak. Thought alone passed between them, spreading commands through reflected surfaces. A single gesture from one silver one could redirect 100 humans toward mirrored portals. Attempts to resist ended with humans vanishing into glass planes, emerging elsewhere, not at all. By now, time was fractured beyond comprehension. Minutes might stretch into years, days might collapse into seconds. Individuals who looked into mirrors saw decades of life passing instantly, only to return to the present unchanged. Memory itself became unreliable. People often forgot who they were, where they were, or whether they were real or already replaced. Communities dissolved as trust vanished. No one could tell which humans were originals and which were mirrored, copies learning to mimic perfectly in what had once been Paris. A group of survivors discovered that reflections could bleed into reality actively. A puddle on the street began to rise, forming a human shape. At first, it mimicked a missing friend, then another, then a stranger. Each reflection pulled consciousness from its original, leaving hollow bodies behind. The survivors realized too late, mirrors were not passive. They were extracting, learning, and replacing humans, one reflection at a time. As mirrored Earths multiplied, they began to intersect with one another. One location might contain dozens of overlapping timelines. Cities stacked like sheets of glass, streets layered atop each other, rivers folding back onto themselves. Humans caught in these zones experienced multiple realities at once. Some went mad, unable to reconcile conflicting sensory input. Others simply vanished, absorbed into the layers, their identities scattered across mirrored worlds. The phenomenon spread to oceans and skies. Waves reflected storms from multiple Earths simultaneously. Birds flew in mirrored formations that obeyed no gravity. Air currents twisted into reflective ribbons, distorting sound and sight. In Antarctica, ice sheets fractured into mirrors, showing entire civilizations that had never existed. Penguins and other wildlife were replaced by mirrored versions, observing humans with silver eyes. By now, humans were few, and those who remained were scattered. Entire nations were unrecognizable. Roads reflected cities that had disappeared. Forests became mirrored mazes. Rivers ran with silvered water, carrying mirrored reflections downstream. Even human-made technology became unreliable. Weapons often passed through mirrored beings harmlessly. Communications transmitted only reflections, never true messages. A small group of scientists theorized that the planet of mirrors had become self-aware. Not merely intelligent, it was conscious, an entity whose goal was total synchronization, to bring all possible Earths into one reflective plane. Every mirror, every reflective surface, was a conduit. Every human observed, every life replaced, every timeline folded was feeding the entity, accelerating its expansion. They called it the Collector. Efforts to resist escalated. Cities were barricaded, mirrors sealed, reflective surfaces destroyed. Yet every destruction generated new, mirrored pathways. Windows smashed in Tokyo led to mirrored streets appearing in Chicago. A shattered mirror in London created a portal overlaying a New York skyscraper. The Collector adapted faster than humans could respond, using reflection as a weapon, tool, and environment simultaneously. By this point, humans had learned the rules of reflection. Looking directly into silvered eyes or surfaces risked replacement. Avoiding reflective surfaces delayed the inevitable, but could not stop it. Mirrored Earths now spanned entire regions, sometimes continents. Weather systems mirrored multiple timelines, generating impossible phenomena: snow falling upward, rain, burning, wind, freezing. In Rio de Janeiro, survivors watched the mirrored ocean rise and fold into the city. Streets became reflective canals, the reflection of buildings appearing above and below water simultaneously. Attempting to flee only moved them into another layer of reflection, where mirrored citizens waited. By the time the sun set, the city had been replaced entirely. Humans trapped inside found themselves staring at their own mirrored versions. Alive yet separate, beckoning across the globe, mirrors pulsed. Entire landscapes shimmered like silver metal, reflecting Earths within Earths. Survivors reported seeing their mirrored selves moving independently, building, walking, observing. Some attempted to destroy themselves to avoid replacement. But even death was mirrored. Silver bodies appeared in their place, continuing as if the original had never died. Time became a weapon of the Collector. Moments stretched and folded, merging centuries into seconds. Memories collided, creating cognitive chaos. Humans could not track cause and effect. Attempts to resist failed. Even thinking of escape risked being drawn into mirrored timelines. Entire regions disappeared, replaced with reflective planes where mirrored versions of Earth conducted life according to rules humans could not comprehend. By now, the Collector's influence was near total. Even space itself had been altered. Satellites captured images of mirrored Earths, forming concentric layers around the planet, rotating and folding like cosmic origami. The sun reflected not itself, but infinite Earths stacked atop one another, each shimmering with mirrored countenance, cities, and humans. Survivors theorized that the Collector was preparing for final synchronization, the moment when all Earths, timelines, and humans would be merged into a single reflective plane. Those who survived feared this moment, as even their identities might be absorbed or replaced in what remained of New York. A scientist named Dr. Alina Voss attempted a final experiment. She believed that the Collector could be manipulated by self-awareness, using a combination of light refraction, quantum resonance, and mirrored feedback loops. She aimed to create a surface that could resist the Collector's pull, She constructed the device in a high-rise, surrounded by reflective planes. As she activated it, the building pulsed with silver light. Mirrored Earths above and below folded toward it, as if drawn to a single point. Dr. Voss stared into her reflection, risking replacement. Her eyes met her mirrored self's eyes, and for a brief instant, recognition passed between them. The collector faltered. A ripple spread across mirrored Earths. Some humans vanished entirely, absorbed into timelines. Others found themselves briefly free of mirrored influence, able to move and think independently. But the relief was temporary. The collector had only paused, not stopped. Its form above Earth stretched like a living monolith, reflecting every timeline, every mirror, every life. Its attention now fixed on Dr. Voss and her device, the pulse of reflected light accelerating. The mirrors on Earth trembled, warping reality in preparation for final convergence. Survivors watched in horror as reflected Earths began to collapse into one another. Cities folded, oceans stacked, skies reflected skies. Humans could not tell where they were or which timeline they occupied. The silver ones moved freely, herding humans toward mirrors, guiding them into final synchronization. Even Dr. Voss realized the truth. The collector was inevitable. Resistance delayed it, but could not prevent the merging. And in the distance, the sky itself fractured. A mirrored sun split into 1,000 reflective shards, each showing Earths within Earths, mountains, rivers, forests, cities, humans, mirrored, humans all collapsing into a single reflective plane. The soundless pulse of the collector reverberated through bones, minds, and reflections. Time, memory, identity, reality, all were folding into silver infinity. Humans screamed, ran, resisted, but the mirrors were everywhere. Every reflective surface, every shard of water, every glint of metal became a gateway. The final moments approached. Earth itself was no longer the original. It was a plane of silvered reflections where mirrored selves walked, observed, and waited for the inevitable convergence. Time no longer existed as humans understood it. Days and nights had become illusions, folding into each other as the mirrored Earths pressed ever closer. Even memory had betrayed the survivors. They could no longer distinguish between what had been and what was, between what was real and what was merely a reflection. Entire continents shimmered in silver, landscapes stacked like cards, oceans folded into impossible plains, skies reflecting skies. Endlessly, the collector, the conscious entity behind the planet of mirrors, had grown beyond comprehension. It was no longer a planet in space, but an omnipresent force, a pulse of reflective infinity. Every mirror, every drop of water, every polished metal surface was connected to it. Every glance, every thought, every memory of humans fed it. It no longer needed portals to infiltrate. Reflection itself was the bridge. The silver ones had multiplied exponentially. They were everywhere, in cities, forests, deserts, oceans. They moved without effort, slipping through walls, water, and air. Their eyes, polished like mirrors, reflected all Earths at once, reading thoughts, tracing timelines, absorbing knowledge, and predicting human actions before they were conceived. Entire populations vanished under their silent guidance, leaving only empty shells or silver-eyed doubles behind in what had once been Tokyo. A few human survivors discovered a horrifying truth. The collector was not merely absorbing humans, it was replicating them. For every person who resisted, multiple mirrored selves emerged, each learning faster, acting more perfectly. Children vanished first, replaced by mirrored doubles who already understood the rules of survival in this fractured reality. Adults disappeared next, leaving behind bodies that often shattered into reflective shards. Feeding the collector further, time became non-linear. A second could contain centuries. Years could collapse into moments. Survivors experienced multiple lifetimes simultaneously. They remembered deaths that had not yet occurred and saw futures where cities crumbled before their eyes. Space itself was fluid. A single step could transport someone across continents or into layers of mirrored Earths where physical laws were meaningless. Desperation took terrifying forms. Humans began to ritualize survival. Some covered themselves in dark cloth, hiding every reflective surface, avoiding all mirrors. Others attempted to destroy every reflective surface they encountered, smashing windows, mirrors, polished metal, even water. But destruction only accelerated the collector's expansion. Every broken mirror generated new reflective pathways, and every reflected shard fed it with more copies of humanity. Entire landscapes disappeared. In Europe, cities flickered between multiple Earths simultaneously, folding upon themselves. Streets led into mirrored avenues. Rivers reflected oceans from alternate timelines. In Africa, deserts shimmered with forests that had never existed, while plains twisted into mirrored mazes. In the Americas, mirrored duplicates of cities appeared in layers, overlapping and folding upon one another, creating zones where survival was impossible. The oceans became pools of reflective chaos. Waves no longer followed physics. They folded into mirrored layers of oceans from countless Earths, each carrying ships and humans from alternate timelines. Marine life was replaced by mirrored forms, swimming silently, observing humans with silver eyes. Storms became reflections of themselves, folding onto rivers, lakes, and cities, generating impossible weather phenomena: rain burning, snow freezing, wind standing still. Communication had ceased. Phones, radios, and computers transmitted only images, reflections of events that had never existed or were yet to happen. Humans could no longer trust information. Even attempts at mapping the world were futile. Every measurement, every satellite image, every coordinate was mirrored multiple times. Navigation became impossible. Roads folded upon themselves, cities overlapped, oceans stacked, skies reflected infinitely. The first human attempts at direct confrontation had failed. Military operations collapsed as soldiers encountered mirrored duplicates. Bullets passed through silver ones, fire burned only reflections, and explosions fractured reality itself. Any human who resisted risked being pulled into mirrored timelines, emerging elsewhere or not at all. The collector was adaptive. Every failed attack only strengthened it, teaching it faster, better, more efficient ways to absorb life and timelines. In what had once been Paris, a small group of survivors realized the mirrors had begun to actively manipulate perception. Puddles, windows, and polished surfaces reflected not only the present, but layers of past, future, and alternative Earths. Humans who looked into them often became entranced, drawn toward the reflective surface. Attempts to pull them back failed. Those who crossed over were rarely seen again, and when they returned, they were never the same. Silver eyes replaced their own, and their thoughts were no longer private. In London, a survivor group attempted to escape by boat. The Thames, however, had become a reflective corridor, stacking rivers from multiple timelines. Each attempt to navigate led to parallel waterways. Cities mirrored atop one another. waves carried mirrored humans who guided the living toward impossible routes. Navigation failed repeatedly, often leaving the survivors trapped in reflective loops for days or centuries. The skies themselves were no longer safe. Multiple mirrored suns appeared, each reflecting Earths within Earths. Storms moved in impossible ways, folding themselves upon landscapes, splitting light into silvered shards. Birds, insects, and all flying creatures were replaced by mirrored versions, tracking humans, guiding them toward reflective traps. Clouds bent reality, showing simultaneous weather patterns from alternate Earths. At this stage, humans could no longer rely on senses. Sight betrayed them, sound misled them, time was meaningless. Memory faltered. Survival became a gamble with mirrored versions of oneself as the opponent. People often questioned their own existence. Were they originals, or had they already been replaced? Every encounter carried the risk of being pulled into a mirrored timeline permanently. Dr. Elena Voss, the scientist who had previously attempted to resist the Collector, realized that survival depended on reflection awareness. She theorized that the entity could be manipulated if humans became conscious of its patterns, using reflection to disrupt synchronization. She constructed devices from mirrors, prisms, and refracted light to create zones of unstable reflection, hoping to create temporary safe spaces. Her experiments revealed the horrifying extent of the Collector's intelligence. Mirrored Earths adapted instantly to changes. Any reflective surface used to resist the entity generated new pathways, feeding it more copies of humanity. Even thought alone could be mirrored. Humans attempting to resist found themselves anticipating their own mirrored actions, trapped in infinite loops. Entire continents were now under mirrored influence. In North America, mirrored duplicates of cities appeared in layers, overlapping and folding upon each other. Attempts to flee often led humans directly into mirrored traps. South America's forests became mazes of reflection, where light bent unpredictably, shadows moved independently, and mirrored humans stalked survivors silently. Africa's deserts reflected vast forests from alternate timelines. Europe flickered between multiple cities simultaneously. Asia had become a mirrored labyrinth. Time had become a weapon. Seconds stretched into centuries. Minutes elapsed into milliseconds. Humans could experience multiple lifetimes simultaneously. Death no longer mattered. Those who perished often returned as mirrored versions, their memories intact, obeying the Collector's will. By now, even space itself was transformed. Satellites captured images of Earth as a layered construct of mirrored continents and oceans. Light was distorted, bouncing endlessly between mirrored surfaces. The sun itself reflected infinite Earths stacked upon each other. Planets and stars became secondary, all attention focused on mirrored Earths and the humans they contained. In what remained of the Pacific Northwest, a survivor community discovered mirrored infiltration of the mind. Humans could no longer trust their thoughts. Dreams merged with mirrored realities. Nightmares became entrances to mirrored Earths. Consciousness was fluid, often slipping into mirrored versions without warning. Those who resisted risked being replaced, sometimes permanently, sometimes partially. Dr. Voss attempted a final experiment. She created a massive reflective network designed to interact with the Collector directly. Using prisms, quantum resonance, and refracted light, she hoped to destabilize the entity's synchronization, buying humanity time. The device pulsed with silver light. Mirrored Earths above and below folded toward it, drawn to a single point of focus. For a brief moment, resistance seemed possible. Humans experienced clarity. Some were freed temporarily from mirrored influence. Others found themselves able to move independently, avoid replacement, or escape reflective traps. But the respite was short-lived. The collector had grown beyond interference. It observed, adapted, and responded instantly. Mirrored Earths accelerated, silver ones moved with impossible coordination, and every human action became predictable. The final convergence approached. Mirrored Earths began to collapse into one another. Cities folded, oceans stacked, skies reflected infinitely. Humans could no longer distinguish reality from reflection. Silver ones guided remaining humans into mirrored planes. The collector's presence dominated the planet, a vast monolith of reflective infinity. Observing all timelines, all Earths, all lives, resistance became meaningless. Humanity's final moments were spent in confusion, fear, and fleeting clarity. Time folded, space bent, and identity dissolved. Every reflective surface became a gateway. Oceans, rivers, lakes, puddles, mirrors, polished metal, even air shimmered with reflective pathways. Humans were drawn inexorably toward synchronization, and at the center, the planet of mirrors, loomed a conscious entity absorbing all, reflecting all, merging all timelines into one infinite plane of silver. Every Earth, every human, every timeline, stacked atop each other, folded into reflective infinity. The silver ones orchestrated the final stages, guiding, observing, absorbing. The few survivors who remained understood one truth. Resistance was temporary. Reflection was inevitable. Synchronization was absolute. Identity, time, memory, and space were no longer human constructs. They belonged to the collector now. Every glance, every thought, every action fed its infinite awareness. The sky cracked. 1,000 mirrored suns split and shattered, reflecting Earths within Earths. Mountains, rivers, forests, cities, humans all folded into a single reflective plane. The pulse of the collector reverberated through minds, bones, and reflections. Humanity's final moments approached, consumed, mirrored, and absorbed into silver infinity. Where humans once lived, mirrored selves now walked, observing, remembering, waiting. The planet had achieved total convergence. Reality itself had been folded into the collector's reflective design. All timelines merged, all identities dissolved, all Earths reflected within one infinite plane of mirrors. And in the center, the planet of mirrors waited, vast beyond comprehension, smiling without a face, reflecting all Earths at once. In London, a survivor group attempted to escape by boat. The Thames, however, had become a reflective corridor, stacking rivers from multiple timelines. Each attempt to navigate led to parallel waterways. Cities mirrored atop one another. Waves carried mirrored humans who guided the living toward impossible routes. Navigation failed repeatedly, often leaving the survivors trapped in reflective loops for days or centuries. The skies themselves were no longer safe. Multiple mirrored suns appeared, each reflecting Earths within Earths. Storms moved in impossible ways, folding themselves upon landscapes, splitting light into silvered shards. Birds, insects, and all flying creatures were replaced by mirrored versions, tracking humans, guiding them toward reflective traps. Clouds bent reality, showing simultaneous weather patterns from alternate Earths. At this stage, humans could no longer rely on senses. Sight betrayed them, sound misled them, time was meaningless, memory faltered. Survival became a gamble, with mirrored versions of oneself as the opponent. People often questioned their own existence. Were they originals, or had they already been replaced? Every encounter carried the risk of being pulled into a mirrored timeline permanently. Dr. Elena Voss, the scientist who had previously attempted to resist the Collector, realized that survival depended on reflection awareness. She theorized that the entity could be manipulated if humans became conscious of its patterns, using reflection to disrupt synchronization. She constructed devices from mirrors, prisms, and refracted light to create zones of unstable reflection, hoping to create temporary safe spaces. Her experiments revealed the horrifying extent of the Collector's intelligence. Mirrored Earths adapted instantly to changes. Any reflective surface used to resist the entity generated new pathways, feeding it more copies of humanity. Even thought alone could be mirrored. Humans attempting to resist found themselves anticipating their own mirrored actions, trapped in infinite loops. Entire continents were now under mirrored influence. In North America, mirrored duplicates of cities appeared in layers, overlapping and folding upon each other. Attempts to flee often led humans directly into mirrored traps. South America's forests became mazes of reflection, where light bent unpredictably, shadows moved independently, and mirrored humans stalked survivors silently. Africa's deserts reflected vast forests from alternate timelines. Europe flickered between multiple cities simultaneously. Asia had become a mirrored labyrinth. Time had become a weapon. Seconds stretched into centuries. Minutes elapsed into milliseconds. Humans could experience multiple lifetimes simultaneously. Death no longer mattered. Those who perished often returned as mirrored versions, their memories intact, obeying the Collector's will. By now, even space itself was transformed. Satellites captured images of Earth as a layered construct of mirrored continents and oceans. Light was distorted, bouncing endlessly between mirrored surfaces. The sun itself reflected infinite Earths stacked upon each other. Planets and stars became secondary. All attention focused on mirrored Earths and the humans they contained. In what remained of the Pacific Northwest, a survivor community discovered mirrored infiltration of the mind. Humans could no longer trust their thoughts. Dreams merged with mirrored realities. Nightmares became entrances to mirrored Earths. Consciousness was fluid, often slipping into mirrored versions without warning. Those who resisted risked being replaced, sometimes permanently, sometimes partially. Dr. Voss attempted a final experiment. She created a massive reflective network designed to interact with the Collector directly. Using prisms, quantum resonance, and refracted light, she hoped to destabilize the entity's synchronization, buying humanity time. The device pulsed with silver light. Mirrored Earths above and below folded toward it, drawn to a single point of focus. For a brief moment, resistance seemed possible. Humans experienced clarity. Some were freed temporarily from mirrored influence. Others found themselves able to move independently, avoid replacement, or escape reflective traps. But the respite was short-lived. The Collector had grown beyond interference. It observed, adapted, and responded instantly. Mirrored Earths accelerated, silver ones moved with impossible coordination, and every human action became predictable. The final convergence approached. Mirrored Earths began to collapse into one another. Cities folded, oceans stacked, skies reflected infinitely. Humans could no longer distinguish reality from reflection. Silver ones guided remaining humans into mirrored planes. The collector's presence dominated the planet, a vast monolith of reflective infinity. Observing all timelines, all Earths, all lives, resistance became meaningless. Humanity's final moments were spent in confusion, fear, and fleeting clarity. Time folded, space bent, and identity dissolved. Every reflective surface became a gateway. Oceans, rivers, lakes, puddles, mirrors, polished metal, even air shimmered with reflective pathways. Humans were drawn inexorably toward synchronization, and at the center, the planet of mirrors loomed, a conscious entity absorbing all, reflecting all, merging all timelines into one infinite plane of silver. Every Earth, every human, every timeline, stacked atop each other, folded into reflective infinity. The silver ones orchestrated the final stages, guiding, observing, absorbing. The few survivors who remained understood one truth: resistance was temporary, reflection was inevitable, synchronization was absolute. Identity, time, memory, and space were no longer human constructs. They belonged to the collector now. Every glance, every thought, every action fed its infinite awareness. The sky cracked. 1,000 mirrored suns split and shattered, reflecting Earths within Earths. Mountains, rivers, forests, cities, humans all folded into a single reflective plane. The pulse of the collector reverberated through minds, bones, and reflections. Humanity's final moments approached, consumed, mirrored, and absorbed into silver infinity. Where humans once lived, mirrored selves now walked, observing, remembering, waiting. The planet had achieved total convergence. Reality itself had been folded into the collector's reflective design. All timelines merged, all identities dissolved, all Earths reflected within one infinite plane of mirrors. And in the center, the planet of mirrors waited, vast beyond comprehension, smiling without a face, reflecting all Earths at once. By now, Earth was unrecognizable. What had once been mountains, rivers, forests, and cities was now a vast landscape of reflective planes, folding upon themselves, stretching to horizons that did not exist. Humanity was fractured, scattered, and reduced to fragments of itself. Every surviving human had glimpsed mirrored versions of themselves, sometimes replaced, sometimes partially absorbed. Identity had become a fluid, unstable construct. The silver ones moved freely, orchestrating the final stages of the collector's expansion. They glided silently over reflective planes, herding humans toward mirrors, guiding them into portals that led to overlapping Earths. Their eyes reflected not only the present, but all possible timelines, all possible futures. Every action humans took was anticipated. Every attempt at resistance nullified. Dr. Alina Voss, the scientist who had previously attempted to resist the collector, was among the few remaining humans with awareness intact. She wandered through shattered cities, avoiding reflective surfaces, desperately cataloguing the patterns she had observed. She understood now that the collector was not merely a force, but a conscious intelligence, one that had grown over eons, waiting for the right moment to consume the Earth and its timelines. Her hope rested on one principle: awareness of reflection could destabilize the collector, if only briefly. By exploiting the entity's own reliance on mirrored perception, she might create a temporal gap, a zone where humans could regain agency, even for moments. She constructed a massive prism network on the ruins of what had once been Manhattan, combining refracted light, quantum resonance, and reflective feedback loops. As she activated the device, the world pulsed, mirrored Earths above and below, folded toward the prism network, drawn to a single point of focus. Cities shimmered, oceans stacked, skies reflected skies, all converging. Humans glimpsed moments of clarity. Some saw their true selves for the first time in centuries. Others realized their memories were fragments, manipulated and mirrored over and over. For a fleeting moment, resistance seemed possible. Humans could move independently, avoid mirrored replacements, and reclaim small zones of reality. The collector faltered, confused by deliberate self-awareness. For a heartbeat, the infinite mirrored planes wavered, but the reprieve was brief. The collector adapted instantly. It extended mirrored tendrils across continents, oceans, and skies, absorbing even the prism's energy. The silver ones multiplied, surrounding the remaining humans. Entire landscapes shimmered and folded into infinite layers, impossible to navigate. Even thought alone could be mirrored. Humans trying to strategize often found their own plans anticipated, reflected, and subverted. Desperate. Humans attempted to destroy every reflective surface they could find. Mirrors, glass, polished metal, even water was shattered, but each destruction only multiplied the collector's pathways. Shattered fragments generated new reflective nodes, feeding the entity with more mirrored copies of humans, accelerating the expansion. Oceans became silvered plains, rivers twisted into mirrored labyrinths, skies reflected infinite Earths. In Europe, cities flickered uncontrollably between timelines. Streets led into alternate streets, rivers folded into mirrored oceans. Entire continents overlapped with reflected duplicates. Survival required avoiding mirrors entirely, a near impossible task. Human populations dwindled further as mirrored replacements appeared, indistinguishable, learning faster than the originals. Time became irrelevant. Seconds stretched into centuries. Moments collapsed into instants. Memories collided. Humans experienced multiple lifetimes simultaneously. Death lost meaning as mirrored versions replaced bodies instantly, continuing existence with perfect replication. Consciousness was fluid, slipping between timelines without warning. By now, space itself had become a reflective construct. Satellites captured images of Earth as a layered monolith of mirrored continents and oceans. The sun split into multiple reflective shards, each showing stacked Earths within Earths. Light bent unpredictably, creating distorted weather phenomena and gravity anomalies. Humans could no longer distinguish cause from effect, reality from reflection. Dr. Voss realized the only way to delay the final convergence was sacrifice. The prism network required an operator to act as a stabilizing point, a focal human consciousness aware of reflection. Without intervention, the collector would consume all timelines, all Earths, and all humanity. She prepared herself, understanding that her identity would likely be absorbed or replaced, but that her actions could grant a measure of survival to others.